Good morning. Godmorgen, as we say in Danish. Welcome to the Quantum Computing Grab and Go here at Deloitte. I'm joined today by my two very important guests, Natasha Friis Saxbjerg, head of the Danish IT branch organization. What's it called actually?
It's called, in Danish, IT-branchen, in English, the Danish ICT Industry Association.
Excellent. And to my left, I have Jan B. Lillelund from IBM, CTO here in Denmark, and a quantum buff, if any. And it's very exciting to hear what the prospects are and what IBM can do. But let's jump into it. So the reason I'm hosting is because I have a background in physics. I'm the lead data scientist in Deloitte Risk Advisory. And we have recently understood that quantum is a technology that is emerging and that you should take seriously. So just to start off, let me see if this clicker is working. It doesn't seem to be doing what I wanted to. Let's start off a little bit poetic. The other day I was noticing these beautiful magnolia buds. And one thing that you can see is that they're all pointing up. And the branches are all gnarly. They go all sorts of left and right and so on. But each little bud knows where to go exactly up. So something is happening inside the bud that is sensing gravity. Maybe something is sedimenting at the bottom. But in order to understand this kind of process, we need to understand the chemistry that's happening inside. And this chemistry is best understood if we understand it at the level that it happens, and that is quantum mechanics. So perhaps it is very important for us to understand such a simple thing as these magnolia pointing up. And I think this should be pathos enough for us to begin with. But let's note that nature is neither just straight lines or clean. It's not ruled by a simple abacus. As such, nature is complex and ruled by the most successful of all natural laws, quantum mechanics. We'll get into why it's called quantum and why it's called mechanics. It's not a big secret. And quite importantly, nature does not have to make sense, but we do, and this is why it's a tough gig, but let's just try. So the other day I was asked, why should anyone care about a quantum computer? Well, because it might be much better at certain problems. Well, why is that? Well, in order to understand that, we will dive into what a quantum computer is. Richard Feynman started this whole field of quantum computing 40 years ago by saying that nature is quantum mechanical and cannot be solved by classical computers. So we need to build a model that's based on the building blocks of nature. And what are those? Well, it's particles, atoms, and they behave like waves. We know that because when you send the single particles towards tiny, tiny holes right next to each other, they come out on the other side as if waves that pass through these slits. The intensity we can measure, and it will pass through and either reflect somewhat off the barrier or hit the background wall in certain spots, which completely fits with a wave description. So if that is not enough for you to feel that this is very strange, they are also actually not always determined fixed in the outcome of being spin up or spin down, which we will use as the qubit 1 and 0. They're actually in a sort of superposition, which is, you could say, strangely deterministic, but the outcome is random. And that turns out to actually be a very strong advantage. So let's say you have a qubit which is in this superposition as illustrated by the green and yellow arrow pointing up and down at the same time. When we measure it, it may come out green. Next time we measure it, it comes out yellow. Maybe it comes out green again. If it's 50-50 in superposition of these two states, the outcome is completely random, as random as anything you could possibly want. Now, that is odd. The next thing is something that even Einstein had a problem with. So don't worry. I have to admit quite honestly that I don't understand quantum mechanics fully. I don't think that's actually even something that you should aspire to understand fully. But there's something called entanglement, a sort of a love relationship that two qubits can have. And when they then are entangled, which you can do by bringing them close together and then bringing them far away from each other without anything touching them, if you measure one of them, the other one will immediately have the same state as that one, which is extremely odd. and something that is very strange. You could say, well, a way out of that is, what if they're actually both preconditioned in some way to actually be up at the same time in some hidden way? And turns out, no. The moment they're entangled, it is as if they are two little waves, and then they will hit the same state randomly when you look at them. And it could be that they point down. Einstein called this a spooky action at a distance. It is, however, very real. So we started out rough. These are three very strange properties, but they are incredibly powerful. So before we move anything further, you could say, all right, that's all good and fine. I really don't care. But the thing is that quantum computers are already being built. We will hear more about that later from our excellent guest here to my left. The thing is that development is going extremely fast. In 1964, Gordon Moore published his law of scaling of the classical computer, whereby it doubles every 18 months. Well, we already have at least 6 or 7 points on a curve that's comparable to that. And it is going actually, I would say, even faster than exponential. It's incredible what's happening. So it's scaling faster. Is it practical today? It is for some people who partner up with a hardware supplier and get access to the largest ones. For the rest of us, we have to wait until we can afford to get in such an access. And this is actually very exciting. You can solve real problems already today. One point that is also extremely amazing, because of this superposition that they're up and down at the same time, all you have to do is add a single qubit to double the power of such a computer. But if you want to double a classical computer, you can either double the clock frequency or you can double the number of transistors on it. There are billions of transistors in a CPU, so if you double it to a couple of billion, it comes double as fast. And not even then, actually, because there are all sorts of other limitations. But one qubit has this incredible effect. So one qubit explores 2 states, 2 qubits 4, 3, 8, 4, 16, 32, 64, 128, and we're just at 7 qubits. You know, most of these things are realized because we can correct the errors they make. And just to put things in perspective, 300 qubits can explore more states than there are atoms in the universe. And combined with entanglement, we are now able to solve problems that are at that level of complexity. So this hopefully should tell you something about that these things can scale very quickly and they can be incredibly powerful. So what do? Well, you operate on bits just like a classical computer, but they use some quantum gates. These qubits, when we describe them, and you don't have to know anything about physics, we describe them as living on a sphere. And here we see an illustration where the up state, which we call the 0 state, is rotated to be the 1 state. So this is an operation that flips the qubit. You could call it a swap. It's called a NOT gate. So it simply just rotates this vector down. So now we've turned the 0 into 1. And the moment you have all these kind of operations, you can start doing calculations. To make it extremely powerful, and then we cannot even show it on this sphere anymore, the block sphere, you can even say that the qubits are the new kid on the block sphere. You can actually condition them on each other. And you can say one of them controls the other. So the black controls the green. And as long as the black is in the 0 state, it doesn't do anything to the target. But when it's in the 1 state, it flips the target either from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 0. If you do this, the 2 qubits are now entangled. And some people are talking about that maybe there's a upper level of 300 qubits, but then at least 300 qubits stood their ground at the NOT gates. And let that be the single lame dad joke for today. I hope you got it. Qubits are hard to control. Some of them live for a very short time, some of them for a longer time. They're also difficult to entangle. So let's take a look at some architectures. We're not going to dive into it. But there are architectures that use what's called a transpond technology, which is like a tiny radio circuit that you interact with microwaves, and you can flip a photon up and down. You can trap ions. It's also very interesting. I call that the atomized spray computer, where you spray atoms and you trap them all by lasers, and then you manipulate them. And they are very stable. There's another technology where you take some extremely pure silicon called a quantum dot, and you manipulate the electrons on it. You have a proposed model where filaments that are superconducting have the qubits at the end, and then you braid them, just like you would braid a leather belt in Viking times or whatever you want. And in the end now, which I think is also very interesting, diamonds. You can shine lasers on diamonds that have nitrogen dopings, and they have vacancies inside, and inside those vacancies we can have the qubits. The transponds are building on current knowledge about how to build computers. This is, for example, the architecture chosen by IBM and Google, unless there are skunk works where other architectures are being built, which we probably won't know until it's announced publicly. They're fast, but they have some issues with stabilizing them. The ion trap are very stable, but they are slow. Silicon dots could be scaled very easily, but they are hard to entangle with each other. The fermions are proposed, which could be very interesting, and they would potentially be very stable, but it seems to be a way off before we'll see these architectures in practice. And nitrogen diamonds are stable but hard to entangle. There is an ecosystem. We have full stack hardware company providers such as IBM, Google. Honeywell is a player. It's not just your kitchenware. If you're living in the US, for example, and you know how they supply your blender, they also supply actually even weapons, I believe, and also quantum computers. Other players like IonQ and then you have a sort of an outsider called D-Wave, which are building what's called an annealer, which can be used for optimizing, and they are actually being used also in business. Other players like Xanadu are proposing some and actually building some qubits that are working with photons. Amazon, Microsoft, and Google have platforms such as IBM, the IBM Q system, where anyone can sign up and play with quantum computers today if you want, actually even while I'm talking. Let's take some news. What's been happening in the last year, which I found was, if I had to choose 4 things, there was an announcement by PsiQuantum and Global Foundries that they want to build a fully functional computer, and this is exciting, just like IBM wants to build a fully functioning quantum computer. Xanadu came out with their photonics chips, and as you can see, maybe you can see in the background, that chip is sitting on a thumb and works at room temperature. And in Australia, a company called Quantum Brilliance are using diamonds to provide some quantum power in little cards you can mount in a server already today. Of course, there are limitations to all of these things. And of particular interest, which is kind of in the quantum computer area, is the ability to form a multi-node network of qubits, which is in some ways fundamentally really a challenge. And there was an announcement by the University of Delft just recently that it was possible to create a network of 3 qubits, which I believe is incredibly important result. We have roadmaps, and we will hear later about the IBM roadmap. These commitments are what I think is something that we should also all admire because of the incredible effort that it takes. Also of noteworthy news were that the Chinese built a non-programmable photonics computer which can solve a single problem, but in a way that can take classical computers billions of years in case we were to try doing that. And let me just quench one myth immediately. Quantum computers are not parallel in the sense that you can just take a number of computers in parallel and then you can compete with them. Quantum computers are parallel in a way that no computer you can ever devise when the quantum computer is big enough will ever be able to compete with quantum computers if they come. And this is big if is part of why today's session is called quantum readiness. Some use cases, and here's one that's really close to my heart, and that's the chemistry and genetics. Chemistry is about when a reaction will take place. So I'm showing, for example, the hydrogen atom, which we understand in detail. analytically, classically, from 100 years ago, and this year is the 100-year anniversary of the Niels Bohr Institute in celebration of that accomplishment. However, we have a hard time describing anything more complex than that. Nitrate, as you see here, is produced in an incredibly energy-intensive process. If we can do that and find other ways of catalyzing nitrogen straight out of the air to make fertilizer, that would probably help out on world hunger. And then you see a protein structure, something I work with NMR spectroscopy. And you've heard that maybe the folding problem may have been solved in December, where there was this CASP competition. But there's a little aber dabei with that competition, which is that the precision is 1 angstrom. So if you're 100% accurate in your prediction, you're still 1 angstrom away from where the atoms really are. And to put that in perspective, the nitrogen atom bonds are 1 angstrom each, so they're not very precise. All of this is a promise that we hope quantum computers can do. And IBM has proved that 5 years ago on a paper that was on the front page of Nature, where ground states of molecules, simple molecules, were calculated. And actually, if you go through all of that mathematics, which I took time to do, it's kind of a miracle how it's done, but it's 100 years of quantum mechanics that went into that. Then you have the possibility of solving combinatorial problems, such as the traveling salesman. And, ironically, traveling salesman is even more relevant these days under the corona pandemics, where everybody has their things delivered. So the faster and more efficient you can calculate these routes, the more you have a margin that you can use for profit. Of course, secure communication and code breaking is a promise of quantum computers. And when it comes to sustainability, for example, batteries can be optimized. IBM and Daimler are working on increasing the energy density of batteries, which are actually, in fact, when you look at them, not very energy dense, which is sort of a problem, because then you could say that all electrical transportation hits an interesting point where, in order to increase their range, they become much more heavy, which means they need more batteries, and then they might be caught in an infinite loop of having a gigantic battery. Or if they're faster, they become so heavy that they need more batteries. We need those batteries to have more energy. And if we could calculate how superconductivity could be attained, we could also get quite far, because then we wouldn't have to increase power production very much. Superconductors are incredibly frugal. The use cases in risk could be, for example, decryption of current day information. So a study shows that experts are estimating that within 20 years, current information that is encrypted right now could be broken. It is hypothesized that maybe 4,000 qubits, 4,098 qubits could break RSA 2048. And if you don't know what that is, it's the encryption we use today. In other words, make sure that your information is redundant in 20 years, otherwise it can be used in an adversarial way. Interestingly, the quantum computer is actually a no-reveal deterrent, as Scott Aronson says, because with nuclear weapons, you are actually deterring by showing you have them. But quantum computers can be a deterrent by not showing that you have them, because not having them, or not showing that you have them, works just like with the Enigma machine. You don't reveal these kind of technologies. And in some way, that has spurred an arms race, if you will, where there's now some quantum nationalism, just like there is an AI nationalism. It can also be used in other systems, and I'm just mentioning financial risk, which is modeled by one of the geniuses and one of my heroes at IBM, Stefan Werner, showed that you can actually be more efficient in financial risk. So with these words, I think we will go over to our guest, and we'll open up for the discussion. We should talk about quantum readiness, and both of you, I would say, should first maybe introduce yourself and what your thoughts are. I think we should start with you, Natasha. We should just get ready for the session.
No?
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll start. My name is Natasha Friis-Saksgaard. As you said, I'm the CEO of the Danish ICT Industry Association. I've been working with tech since the mid-90s, and around 10 years ago, 15 years ago already, I was a founder of startups and felt very much alone in the Danish ecosystem, and started together with other great forces to build the ecosystem we have today in Copenhagen. And the reason I'm mentioning that is that I had a dinner more than a year ago with some of the people from the Danish quantum community, Charlie Marcus, that we have imported from the US, one of the world leading physicists, and heard about the frustration that we have this extremely great potential of quantum computing in Denmark, but we're not leveraging it enough compared to other countries. So I got that reignation of, well, we can do this again. We need to create an ecosystem. And luckily in my position in the ICT Industry Association, that's one of the things we do, make sure that we can promote technology and build the highway for the business we're representing. So together with the University of Copenhagen and the Niels Bohr Institute, we started the Danish quantum community, which is the reason why I'm sitting here today, not because I'm a quantum geek. So bear with me out there. If you're a quantum geek, if you're a business person like myself, we can talk. It'll probably be okay. But we gathered the ecosystem in Denmark, from government stakeholders to the universities to companies already building quantum out there, and to some of the great vendors, IBM, Microsoft, etc., that are working on this, just to get into the room and actually get that epiphany that we're working towards the same goal. And if we use the power of collective minds and resources, we might be able to accelerate. And I'll get into why we need to accelerate, but that's the reason I'm here today, and that's I'm on a mission together with IT-branchen, the ICT Industry Association, on making sure that quantum will be as popular a buzzword as artificial intelligence, because we actually understand the business potential and we start paying attention. And saying that, I want to do a bit of a commercial. I was allowed to do that. We actually have a conference today and tomorrow in the Danish quantum community. So I know you're going to send a link out. So if you can't get enough of quantum talk today, there's good news. We are continuing from 1 to 5 today and tomorrow, where you can get even more quantum talks.
Excellent. And you were referring to the Niels Bohr Institute, where the quantum theory, the Copenhagen interpretation was formed 100 years ago, which is something we should be proud of. But I think we all agree here today that, okay, this is a beautiful heritage. And if quantum readiness or quantum computers can get people interested in quantum mechanics, I would say personally, as a somewhat of a geek, that in itself is a beautiful thing that can happen. And of course, we need you as the ambassador to to promote and to be enthusiastic, and then you don't have to feel the pain maybe of having to try to program them and so on.
But I feel the pain of trying to understand it, because as an ambassador you need to make a little bit of sense. But
well,
I'm working on that, getting help from good people out there.
Yeah, and I mean, if Einstein had a problem with them, in fact, actually even decrying it, I think everybody's allowed to say this is nuts. I don't know. I don't believe this at all. Let's prove it. And in fact,
I think Richard Feynman said that if anybody claims to understand quantum physics, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Such a relief.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So Jan, please, can you, the IBM roadmap, all the exciting announcements?
Maybe I should just tell the viewers who I am. So
yes,
I'm Jan Lillelund. I'm from IBM Denmark. I have several roles as a CTO for Denmark, but also in this context, I'm a IBM Quantum Ambassador. So what that entails is I have gained a little insight into this field and am spending some of my time trying to get people enthused about this subject. Hopefully to the level where I am. I think this is going to be an extremely interesting area in the future. The developments that we are seeing in this area are quite extraordinary. I came into the area in 2016 when our first quantum computer came online. I'd been following it on the sidelines before that out of professional curiosity, and also trying to understand some of the concepts. I had quantum physics back at university. I won't claim I understood much of it. I got through it. But it's been a conundrum to me ever since, and the fact that we can use it today to do very complex calculations just boggles the mind. If we look at where we are today, we have, I just checked this morning, we have 34 quantum computers online, ranging from 5 qubits to 65 qubits, and we're building more. We have a roadmap right now for 127 qubits this year. Next year, we have a new setup which will yield us around 433 qubits. And in 2023, we will be reaching 1,121 qubits. So if you look at the progression here, and remember what Jacob said, that when you add 1 qubit, you double the capacity for calculations of the system. This is a hyper-exponential curve. Moore's law was mentioned. I think we're on a trajectory that is faster than that. But there are obstacles, and we're working on it. We're still at what you call NISQ level, noisy intermediate state quantum computers, which means that we can only do calculations for a limited time period before the, if you can call it, the quantum CPU breaks down or you need to reset it. Obviously, we can calculate a lot today, and we're already working with a number of companies. You mentioned material science and Daimler. We're working with them to model lithium sulfide molecules in attempt to increase battery density. And from what I understand, the results are quite promising. We will probably see electric flight within the near future. We obviously have electric vehicles. Their weight constraints are less demanding than with aircraft, but we will get to a point where I think quantum computers can help aviation in transitioning away, at least for shorter flights, from fossil fuels to electric flight. And these examples crop up everywhere. We see in optimization that this is being used in finance. An interesting thing which is quite complex is when we're moving from fossil fuels to renewables in countries like Denmark, where we want to move to solar and wind from coal, oil, and gas-fired power plants. We're seeing a shift in production and in the way that power is generated, which stresses the grid in a completely new way, in very unpredictable way.
Yeah.
So we're moving from a world or a paradigm where we have production, transmission, and distribution, which is fairly easy. You know, if you need more power, you just put in more coal or fuel, to an area where, or to a paradigm where you have a lot of small producers that are unpredictable, in the sense that if the sun is not shining, or if a cloud comes in front of the sun, your production falls, or if the wind picks up, your production increases, and your insertion points into the grid are all over the place. So suddenly you have a very inhomogeneous production, which is dispersed all throughout your grid. And calculating on that is simply not possible using conventional computers.
Yeah. So you're talking about that if people acquire like a home battery, for example, or they plug in their car and they can feed back into the system. Let's say that we depend on that. Well, what if they all run out at the same time in a local area? Who's going to supply them with extra power? And the power grid right now is only scaled to handle the house appliances and so on. And all of a sudden we have to fill up, gigantic SUVs with this, and this is not where it came from. But so these feedback mechanisms are fantastic. Then you powered flight and maybe superconducting motors and all that stuff. So, Natasha, why do you think that the Danish government needs to step up and take quantum readiness seriously now?
because we have a heritage that is quite unique in the world. We have certain areas within quantum technologies where we have a leading position, and we were just mentioning the 100-year anniversary of the Niels Bohr Institute, which means that we have a tradition that actually puts us in a very special place compared to the world around us. And this is an area where the leading powers in the world are investing massively, because this is, compared to other deep tech, a unique opportunity to get ahead on everything from cyber to using machine learning. So quantum is a race of how can you be in power of the world, and that's why the investments are following. In Denmark, though, even though we have our heritage, we're not investing a lot. If we compare it to Netherlands, our neighbor a bit south, they've been invested more than €1 billion, and we invested from 17 to 19, 80 million Danish kroners. So that's not a lot. So we're losing some of the power we have and the position we have in the world if we're not going to invest anymore. So I think that's probably the most important task for someone like me, is to make sure that the government understands that we have a unique position, and if we want to have something to live off in the future and build on that competitive edge we have, we need to invest more. From a business perspective, you mentioned Moore's Law. We're running out of the scale of what Moore tried to talk about. So we're reaching the end of that. So what's going to follow is quantum. And Charlie Marcus would say to me now, everything is quantum. So I mean, the next generation of quantum technologies, like we talked about, superposition and entanglement. So that's why we need to pay attention, because if we want to accelerate into the future that we need to do in order to comprehend and solve climate change, the green transition into renewables and electrical vehicles, and even flights now, amazing. We need to use some new technologies. So that's why we need to pay attention and why we need to invest much more than we do.
Yes, thank you. Let me just say that here for the remainder of the time, we're opening up for questions from the studio in the chat here. And let's see here. Do you have any use cases of quantum computing in the pharma industry and perhaps some tangible results? First of all, if you partner up with, let's say, IBM or another client, typically, the tangible results of this, either they have to be announced directly, and what I have heard is it's only small molecules. But let me just talk briefly about how that happens, because molecules are incredibly complex, and I'm sure that, for example, in R&D from Novo would say, okay, look, this is too much. How can the computer handle that? It is actually, and I was trying to allude to that, the way we solve the ground state energy of a molecule is actually, in the end, to solve a combinatorial question. And it plays a little bit into the setup of where, if the world looks like Lego, let's build the world out of Lego blocks. So our model is, the world is quantum mechanical, let's use quantum mechanics to calculate that. And we can sort of wrap all the nasty parts of the mathematics and then use the quantum computer as a combinatorial solver, and then get the ground state energy. And we can do this for three atom molecules like beryllium.
We have actually in the KISS kit, we have pre-built structures which you can use directly,
yes,
which enables you to both simulate small molecules, but you can also build what I call a synthetic atom,
yeah,
which is quite extraordinary, because now you can actually, within a computer, build a model of an atom. You can also do that in a classical computer, but with much less resources. And as we scale our physical computers, quantum computers, we will be able to model larger and larger atoms and molecules. What we also have is an interface to chemistry frameworks such as PSY4, such that if you're a chemical engineer, for example, or somebody working in pharma, you can use your existing frameworks and plug in IBM quantum computers in the bottom and run your problems on quantum computers. I'm not saying that this will give you an edge in comparison to HPC right now, but my estimation, my feeling is that within very few years, you will actually, on the largest computers that we provide, be able to get an advantage of that.
Yeah. I mean, so let's make that point. Quantum computers are good for what they're good for. They are not solving everything. Classical computers will be around for a long time.
Oh yes, it will be emerge a hybrid. So if maybe some of the older viewers remember that you could buy a mathematical coprocessor to your PC back in the day, I imagine that although you won't be able to buy it personally, the quantum computer can be viewed as a mathematical coprocessor to the task that you want run in the cloud.
Yeah. And the IBM System 1 Q has a huge controller board that is also cooled down of FPGA chips that are super high speed, specialized chips to control the computer itself. So
there's a classical computer built into even our quantum computers, and we're moving them even into the cryostat, at least parts of them.
And if anyone should sit out there and be a business person, I will try to translate. So HPC, high performance computer, is what quantum is competing with. So that's when we reach that quantum advantage or general purpose of quantum computers. So quantum advantage is when the HPCs can perform a specific or relevant calculation faster than...
Well, the quantum computers can perform faster than the HPC's equivalents.
And that's a race, and we're talking within a decade.
And oh yes, definitely. I personally believe this will come much sooner. And again, the reason for that is comparing to Moore's law, which is exponential in nature, we are continually adding qubits. But we're also working in another dimension, which, if you permit me becoming a little technical, noise or the error rate gives us problems. When we start reducing the error rate, we will also be able to calculate for longer times. And we will be able to do much more. So it's not only scaling qubits up, but it's also reducing the error rate. And those two combined should give you a curve that's even more steep than Moore's law would dictate. So in my estimation, and this is my own personal view on this, I think it's probably going to be much before than the decade is over.
So complementary to traditional technology within a specific area.
Oh yeah, you know, we're looking at specific mathematical problems, but they're very widely used in almost all industries. These mathematical problems, NP-hard problems that for mathematicians and computer scientists know what I'm talking about. But NP-hard problems, a subset of the NP-hard problems, can be solved with quantum computers. And that's the traveling salesman problem. It's within chemistry, optimization, and I don't think any industry will not be impacted by this. They can benefit from this, if not now, then very soon.
So if I may just say, you know, let's talk a little bit practical about what should companies do to become quantum ready. So I will just say what the thoughts are, I think, from my side, and then you can pitch in. But I would say that if you're looking at a marketplace that is ready to adopt quantum computing because there is a use case that will provide some sort of advantage, you need to estimate how long time it will take for the market because you're part of that market. And the question is, if one of your assets, whatever it may be, should live longer than that time, you should consider that you might have to optimize it or change the way you handle that asset. And if your time for migration into this new type of computation is comparable to the market, then you're in trouble and should maybe look at speeding it up, making the transformation. So you need to have people that are dedicated and which will go through the business.
Oh, definitely. And people should understand that right now these people aren't there.
Right.
We need to educate people in this area. IBM is working with a number of institutions on providing insight into how quantum computers work. We have an open a book that we provide, which explains how quantum computing works. It's free to use, and we also have quantum experience, where we try in IBM Cloud to educate people on how to use it, and it's for free, so anybody can register and actually get to run programs on quantum computers. And the reason why we do this is not only to give people an idea of what's going on, but we actually want to educate people into this field because it is going to be huge. Yeah. And when we talk about this in context of what's going on here in Denmark, I think it's very important that also the Danish government understands that if we are to solve things like transitioning out of fossil fuels or optimizing, reducing cost in various areas, we need to take these technologies into consideration. Yeah. And in order to do that, we need people.
Yeah, and just, if you want to say something, let me just say that I think an exercise of building a catalog over your assets, and if you already have one, enriching that with the perspective of what that plays into with the quantum revolution possibly happening, is something that everybody should start. I think actually if you don't have an asset catalog, you should definitely start building one just in any case, because of digitalization, because of the employees should have a place to go and look at all the assets and get good ideas, so you can also mobilize everybody in the organization to get good ideas and see what's going on actually in the business. So yes, start building an asset catalog, yes.
And I think from a more leadership perspective, you need to look at this as a new mindset, a new paradigm. And we've already had quantum in our present technology for years, but this is a new paradigm we're entering. And I think, as you said, Jan, the biggest gap is going to be within skills. It is within deep tech already, but we need to educate academic staff within mathematical skills. And I know DTU and Copenhagen University has already created a master's in quantum tech to make sure we build upon this, because if we don't have the people, we don't have anyone to leverage the potential. That is regard of quantum, but also AI and all the other amazing technologies we can leverage out there. But I think it is understanding, and you're mentioning assets, and I'm not sure a leader understands that specifically, but I think it's more looking at if you have anything that you need to calculate, model, or you have logistics, or you have renewables or green transition, this is just going to be the super power tool that you need in order to create that competitive advantage. And sorry for talking it down, but
no, but it's you're completely right, and the problem is that right now we're in Denmark missing out on all of this. Things are moving very fast, and because of the advancements in technologies, it's not going to come like the classical computer, where we started out with a transistor back in the 50s and we got the PC in the 80s. We started with the transistor back in 2010, 2011. We're now talking computers that are within a few years faster than the fastest classical computers. And that's just within 10, 15 years. And maybe 20. But anyway, this is going to be compressed. And you have to remember, in order to educate people in this field, it takes 5 years to get a master out. Yeah. Plus minus. And if you start today, when those newly educated people within this field come out, the machines will already have been there. Yeah.
And we must remember there are different levels on quantum technology. There's the supercomputer, which you say, if we get it, which is maybe 20, 30 years away. But
I think it comes earlier than that.
You're optimistic today. That's great. But you have
That's good news.
You have quantum communication. You have sensoring, which is GPS or replacing GPS, making it more accurate. You have MR scanners. So there's already technology available today. So this is not something
photonics is moving fast as well.
So that's why you need to pay attention if you're someone making decisions out there. It's already here, and there are different levels. So it's not only about the supercomputer.
And we're also trying to make it accessible. So if we look from a developer perspective, we have core developers that are actually looking into the hardware and optimizing that. And we have developers that are looking at algorithms, creating circuits, as you call it, creating, shall we say, the building blocks that you can use to solve various problems. And on top of that, we get the more system-oriented developers that are using these building blocks to create a faster way of optimizing the power grid, or a faster way of distributing packages, etc. So there will be, as you say, several levels, not only within technologies in this field, but also within abstraction layers, if you want.
Exactly, yeah. So that's where you have hope. You don't need to be a quantum physicist or anything.
No, but you need to understand what you can use it for.
Yes.
So there will be a requirement of, shall we say, basic understanding. So if you're a computer programmer, maybe you won't be programming in assembly language, but understanding how a CPU works will help you in your daily life. And in this area, this will be the case as well.
Well, we put a man on the moon with assembler. Maybe we can put a woman on Mars with quantum computing gates. And with those words, I think we are out of time. And I want to thank you very much. Obviously, we could just keep talking and
Let's
talking
do that.
and talking.
Just turn off the camera and continue.
Yes, we will. Definitely. It was excellent. I've been looking forward to this day for so long, and it's even more than I hoped for. I hope you all enjoyed it out there. Thank you. And tune in for the next Grab and Go session, which I think will be maybe next week. That's all for today.